Welcome, friends. This evening, at the second lecture on conscience of this series of 4 lectures. What is the subject for tonight? Last week, or last 14 days ago, the first lecture was focused on what is conscience and what is the voice of conscience. How can you hear the voice of conscience and what prevents you to hear it? And there were 5 reasons why you were not able to hear your voice of conscience, the voice of your conscience. And I repeat them for you. First of all, when someone is not yet an adult, then the whole ability to listen to your conscience has yet to grow. So children are not so well able to listen to their conscience. They use their conscience naturally, in fact, unconscious. And when you are 21, 24 years, then you have the power to listen to your conscience, the same power as when you ended your last incarnation. So, when you are a child, you are not able to receive the voice of your conscience so clearly. And then the second reason is that you did not practice listening to your conscience. And what you don't practice, you don't do so well. And one of the other things, the reasons, was that by trauma, your ability to hear your voice of conscience is paralyzed. And as an example, I used PTSD, war veterans. And then there is a 4th reason, that is when you, perhaps deliberately or unconsciously, by using drugs and using alcohol, in fact, paralyze your, how must I say that, receiving instrument of your conscience. And then there is the 5th reason, that is because an influence from outside you is influencing you to stop you to listen to your conscience. And examples I gave was that in a group, the group dynamics overtake the individual conscience of the individuals in the group. And one of my favorite examples is a football stadium. What happens there, what people do there, they hardly ever do when they are alone with their own decisions to make. Groups are typical for the outside influence of not listening to your conscience. Okay, that was last lecture, the first lecture. Now we have a somewhat more positive approach for not about not listening to your conscience, but let us search for our conscience. Let us go inward. Let us use our conscience to solve the really deep problems we have in life, in our own life, in society, and we all know there are problems in society. And you can be very, very helpful to support the solutions by going inward and see what wisdom you can find within yourself to solve the problems in society and also in your own life, of course. So, a positive approach. There we go. How can you train your conscience? Is a question many people ask. And after the first lecture, you know what conscience is. Conscience is the total sum of all your wisdom lessons in former incarnations. That is the treasure trove you have and you can use to find wisdom within yourself. And when someone asks, can I train my conscience? By definition, we have to say no. For it is not a question of training your conscience, but training your ability to listen to your conscience. That wisdom is already there. And the only thing you have to do is going inward and listen to it. And that is what you can train. And how can you train that? Let us see. Let us start with that training. The question is how to make contact with your conscience. How can you do that successfully? And the first answer is that when you try to find within yourself your conscience just because you're curious or you want to do it theoretically, just for knowing if it's true, then you guarantee will hear nothing. Because your conscience, your inner part of yourself, your reincarnating part, is not there just to gratify your curiosity. So when that is the only motive by which you go inward, you will hear nothing. And there's another reason why it doesn't work. That is when you use outward actions, praying, ritual, sacrifice, or whatever, to ask your conscience for something. To go inward and ask your higher self to receive something from your higher self. That will never work. Why not? Because most of the time, that part of you that asks things is your personality. That is in fact your lower, passionate, instinctive part of yourself. An instrument, and an instrument you need to be able to contact other living beings. But when your personality asks for something, then it will not work. And another thing is, when you ask your higher self, your conscience, to descend to you, it will not work either. Because it is you, as waking human being, in the waking consciousness, it is your task to go inward, to lift yourself up to the level of your conscience, of your inner wisdom, and then you make contact. For what are you doing then? You forget your personality. You leave that behind you. You ask your personality to be quiet, to listen. You remember from the first lecture, to listen together to the voice of your conscience. And if you do that, then you rise from I-centeredness to all-centeredness. And your higher self is much more universal than we are in our waking consciousness stage. And that means that you have to find within yourself that part that is universal. And when your thinking grows into a universal quality, then you make contact with your conscience. And the intense wish, the intense will to go inward, higher, more spiritual within yourself, we call that aspiration. It is a term you often hear, and in fact no one can define that word so well. Aspiration means add, towards, to something, and spiro in Latin is breathing, breath. So aspiration is diverting, concentrating with your will, your whole being inward and upward. And that is aspiration. Yes? You're breathing upward towards your own higher self. And that is the real meaning. Try it after this lecture, and you see it will work. What is the result of aspiration? You as a searching human being, you aspire, you go inward. What is the result? That higher, more universal, more cosmic part of you reflects back to you. And we call that inspiration. So from within, there starts streaming a stream of, how must I say that, of inspiring energy that reaches your heart and reaches your mind. And then you suddenly see things in a much more wise way. And that is because you aspired, and as an answer, inspiration comes to you. And it is not only in the inner spiritual levels of this universe where this process is working. It is also, for instance, as an example, in the outer world. What do you see? What your heart is doing? Your heart is attracting and then pushing out blood. Yes, the attraction towards the heart, and then by that pulsation of the heart, the blood is pushed out again. And we call that the blood circulation. And at the same time, in this same manner, in this same way, inspiration reaches you because a circulation within yourself is starting. And perhaps you already discover why the title of our lecture is The Magical Power of Following Your Conscience. That means that when you aspire inward with really your whole will concentrated on that, and then a kind of stream of spiritual food is turning back to you, there you start a circulation of that magical energy, that magical power, when you follow your conscience. So we have, first of all, nothing will happen when you just search for your conscience out of curiosity. Nothing will happen when you are only asking for things using outer actions, prayer, ritual, and so on. And you can know that for all those outward rituals also can be done by people who have a very low quality character. Everyone can sing a psalm. Everyone can pray. That doesn't mean that the person doing that becomes better when he is, how must I say that, not willing to change his character. So everyone can pray, good, bad, whatever, and therefore outward actions will never lead to an answer of your conscience. Aspiration gives that answer. Really forgetting yourself and asking things and raising yourself to the level of your conscience. That works. And the fourth is meditation. And meditation, not in the technical sense we all know, but meditation in the sense what it really means, going inward to the heart of the heart of the heart of yourself. You go, yes, it's difficult to say in English. Yes, we go to the center of ourself. For meditating means centering. And when you do that, then you know one thing. You find no answers of your conscience. You realize that you are that reincarnating part of yourself. That you are that part of you where wisdom is concentrated. So then you realize that you are your conscience. You do not listen to it anymore. You know you are your conscience. So 4 levels of making contact with your conscience. And how can you do that even better and better and better? How can you train yourself to do that? Okay, again, 3 steps. And they are very simple. And the moment you see that, it is so clear how it works. When you start consulting your conscience, when you have to take difficult decisions in life, that is the first step. When you do that, that is a very good start, that when there are difficult things to decide, once a year, once a month, once a week or whatever, then you go inward to your conscience. And that is occasionally when it is necessary in your life. But there comes a time that you make a habit of consulting and becoming one with your conscience more often. And that is described in antiquity, in the Greek and Roman world, in the Hindu and Buddhist world, you find it as well. And everyone knows that when a cycle changes in another cycle, that those are the critical moments where you can, in a more easy way, contact those inner influences and inner worlds within yourself. And in daily life, what are those moments? There are 2 very important moments, and that is the second you awake in the morning, and the second you fall asleep in the evening. 2 periods, 2 times, where your whole daily routine is changing from awake to sleeping situation. And yes, Catherine Tingley, the third leader of our organization, was very, very good in giving very practical advice. That was her specialty, to give hints how you could live your life. And I want to read what she wrote, and it is in one of the books. It's yes, it is on our website. You can download it, The Wisdom of the Heart. And it is advice for pupils, for students. And she says, if one rises in the morning in a mood through which the soul can express itself, one is at peace during the whole day. Do you hear it? The soul, and in fact she meant the higher self. When the higher self can express itself through your waking mood, then you are at peace, because that part of you is very close to you the rest of the day. Okay, next sentence. Remember how great is the creative power of the imagination. Build up with it, upon waking, a picture of hope and joy. Lay aside all that belongs to the lower self, the personality, and going up into the temple of the heart, the highest within yourself, dedicate the day to self-purification. Do this, and you invite an invasion of the gods. But rise with the brain-mind dominant, and a day of perplexing difficulties awaits you. And this, friends, is a small text, and tomorrow or the day after tomorrow it will be on internet, and then you can read it again and again. It is also in the book you can download from our website. What she says is, if you direct yourself, if you go up into the temple of the heart, that is that inner self of you, your conscience, then you invite an invasion of the gods. That is a little bit simply told by her, but what she means is that your inner teacher, your inner Buddha and your inner God are entering in your waking sphere and are coloring the qualities of everything you think and decide and act. But rise with the brain-mind dominant, and a day of perplexing difficulties awaits you. And I'm not the only one, but we recognize those days. You recognize days of perplexing difficulties. And now you know that most of those days you started the day with your brain-mind dominant, with your personality talking the whole time, and you are not able to let that personality be quiet. So, Catherine Tingley gives us a wonderful advice. And that is the morning. And she also has a text for the evening. But I wanted to give you also a text of Pythagoras. In the whole antique world, in Greece and in Rome, people practice this. What did Pythagoras advise everyone. Listen, never sleep before going over the acts of the day in thy mind. Simple. We all can do that. Wherein have I done wrong? What have I done? What have I left undone? Examine thyself. If thou hast done evil, blame, and if thou hast done well, rejoice. Practice thoroughly all these maxims, think on them, love them. They will put thee in the way of divine virtue. So every night, before falling asleep, make an overview of your day. And that doesn't mean that you start repeating all the discussions you have had in a nice and less nice way with colleagues, friends, neighbors, and so on, for these are personal details. But go over the acts of the day in thy mind means how must I say that in English? Look at those acts from the eye of your conscience. So go inward to your conscience every night before going to sleep and look with your conscience eye to everything you have done. That, in fact, is also what happens at the end of your incarnation, at the end of your life, just after the stopping of the beating of the heart. Then you look over your whole life, and all those happenings, all those things that happened to you are seen in the light of the higher self, of the inner God, as high as it is possible. Not even the inner teacher or inner Buddha, no, the highest light is shed upon all your acts. And the same, in a very small way, happens every night. And if you make a habit of that, then in fact you train yourself in contacting your inner conscience easier and easier and easier. And at a certain moment, it will be a simple habit about which you don't even think. 2 ways to train yourself in contacting your conscience. And is it already 20 minutes? So we invite you to chew over what you heard and give your questions on our chat. Do I say that well?
Yeah, chat or questions at blavatskyhouse.org.
Okay, yes, your choice. And we answer after 3 minutes your questions about these ideas. Friends, your questions. Lalibel, how many?
I see 2 now.
Okay.
The first one, we've received them through email. When the inner circulation takes place, does it also touch other people? So is that like a wider current or field?
Okay, good question. You're totally right. At the moment that you live your higher ideals and your higher quality thoughts and your more universal expressions within yourself and your contact with those higher parts within yourself, at that moment your whole atmosphere is changing in quality. And everyone living near you or on the same level of you, even if it's far in another country, but when you are contacted in that level, at the same time, in the same way as we are contacting now as well, while you're not in the Blavatskyhouse, yes, at that time we influence each other in a positive way. You never can use that, so let us be unselfish, or let us be better than yesterday, because I want to influence others for the good. That doesn't work. It must go natural, without a personality wanting to achieve something. If you are just yourself, if you are just your higher and highest self, at that moment you help others enormously. And what is helping? That is that those others are easier able to find their own inner influence. So they will never be dependent on your influence, but they go more easily inwards themselves. And that is a good thing. Yes, we influence each other. And that gives us quite a responsibility, because not always we realize that we influence each other. When we are irritated, or when we are in despair, or whatever, all those more negative things, at that moment we also influence each other. And even if you are totally alone at home, you know that when you give way to all those negative influences within yourself, then you are affecting your neighbors, your family on longer distances, and that makes you stopping those emotions more easily, because you know you are responsible to do that. At least I hope that that gives you how must I say that? It gives you a reason to continuously be impersonal and unselfish and as wise as possible. I hope this answers the question. That is, in fact, the suffering of a lecturer. I cannot see you. I cannot see whether this answer helps you or not. So I hope it helps. Okay, Lalibel.
We have another question.
Yes?
Observing yourself is not very common in Western society. It is often limited to feeling impressions. And even though that is the case, can that still be a good first baby step in training yourself?
Yes. Good question. Observing yourself. What is observing yourself? And in the last lecture, we already explained that we have more than one self. Yes, conscience in Greek means syneidesis. That means having a conversation with yourself. When you yourself having a conversation with yourself, that means we have more than one self. Otherwise, you cannot have a conversation. The Greek were wise in that direction. The question is, observing yourself, you have to ask yourself, what part of you is observing what other part? If you, as personality, are observing yourself, most of the time you are thinking, what will someone else van mij vinden?
Think of me.
Think of me. Yes? And that is a very, very personal thing. Yes? Am I popular enough? And so on. That is all the time observing yourself. But the wrong part of you is observing the wrong part of you. And that is not very helpful in the general well-being of humanity. But if you go inward, forgetting your whole personality, not minding what others criticize you or say about your personality, if you leave that behind you and you go inward, forgetting everything else, at that moment you observe, in fact, the inner light that is shining from your inner God and inner Buddha. And that is, in fact, intuition and inspiration. And those two terms are connected for us in our waking stage, are connected with light. You see suddenly how the universe works. And you can see that because you experience it as seeing and light. And then you observe, in fact, that magical power from within. And that is a very good thing to do. So, two ways to look at yourself. Yes, both ways we use in our daily life. Yes, here we looked, is the table clean enough? And we receive comments that the table is too clean. And other people say, no, it is not clean enough. You see, personal meningen, personal opinions against personal opinions. Totally irrelevant. The moment you, after a lecture, say, now I see it, then you have won the ability to observe within yourself. And that's the good thing. I hope this answers your question well enough. Otherwise, chat again, then we talk further.
That is it for now.
Yes, we continue the lecture. So, we are now able